Please subscribe.
It's anything but difficult to abandon the 2020 Subaru Legacy vehicle and head straight for the 5-entryway Outback wagon over a similar showroom that depends on the 4-entryway model. You wouldn't be distant from everyone else either. The wagon surpassed the vehicle 4-1 a year ago. That is, it's simple until you take a gander at the Legacy's cost. That is on the grounds that the 4-entryway packs unbelievable incentive into a vehicle that expenses generally $200 more than a year ago's adaptation, yet gives most drivers 11.6-inch tablet-style touchscreen that is forefront tech for a car that costs well under $30,000 in its most prominent setups. We give the Legacy a 6.4 on our general scale, which matches the Outback's number. Where the Outback grabs a point in outstanding rough-terrain capacity, the Legacy gets one for excellent efficiency that can tape a tank for in excess of 600 expressway miles. Relatively few will recognize the distinctions from the outside between the active Legacy and 2020 variant. The new 2020 Legacy car has a marginally sleeker nose and tamer tail. However, there are less contrasts superficially between this year and a year ago than a period of The Simpsons. Inside the Legacy, the huge tablet-style touchscreen overwhelms consideration and features the real changes, year over year. What's in the engine is the equivalent and unique. Base Outbacks are controlled by a 2.5-liter level 4 that makes 182 pull mated to a consistently factor-programmed transmission, CVT, and all-wheel drive. Those numbers to a great extent coordinate the active Legacy's base powerplant, and the inclination is to a great extent the equivalent. The body is stiffer this year, and the dealing with is skillful, despite the fact that the suspension directs more towards solace instead of lively. An uprated 2.4-liter turbocharged level 4 that makes 260 horsepower is accessible in limited XT and touring XT vehicles, and its capacity helps us to remember energetic cars that are kicking the bucket quicker than papers. Approximately 1 of every 10 purchasers will settle on the stouter XT, yet almost everybody in a high-elevation state should drive both consecutive. The drawback: the Turbo Legacy is thirstier. Consolidated mileage for our drives dove from the mid-30s in base Legacy vehicles down to mid-20s in the turbo cars. 5 grown-ups will fit easily in the Legacy, with almost 40 crawls of extra space for backseat riders. There are 15.1 cubic feet of trunk space, which is supplemented by wide opening. Each Legacy gets standard programmed crisis braking, versatile voyage control, and dynamic path control. Vulnerable side screens and back-programmed crisis braking are on the choices list. The 2020 Legacy Premium is a sweetheart for highlights and cost for $25,895, including gold. Those vehicles get the 11.6-inch touchscreen, 17-inch wheels, fabric upholstery, warmed front seats, double-zone atmosphere control, a calfskin-wrapped directing wheel, and 4 USB ports. Keyless start, route, vulnerable side screens, and the moonroof are additional items on the Legacy Premium. Without a moment to spare for school year kickoff, this 2020 Legacy uses like the most recent version of a reading material car: 4 entryways, trunk, Subaru knows. You get the thought. It's as yet attractive regardless of whether it's simply normal. The Legacy gets a 5. The front end is sleeker with minor changes to the front guard and grille encompasses. At the edges, the main observable change from a year ago's vehicle is a more extreme roof line that dives toward the storage compartment speedier and a fixed character line that is etched further into the entryways. It's anything but difficult to recognize the likenesses between the Legacy and 2020 Outback from the front entryways forward. They're basically the equivalent. From the back entryways back, the Legacy has a racier shape that no one but cars can offer. However, Subaru skirts more extensive back rump or wild wrinkles for a plainer profile contrasted with different vehicles. Likewise for the back, which has tamer back decklet spoiler and more extensive trunk opening. Inside, the enormous 11.6-inch touchscreen commands consideration, However, the dash and materials are more pleasant and milder this time around. The cowl is lower, which is a help to outward vision, and beside ergonomic bandy, the Legacy is a more pleasant spot to be. The most current Legacy rides on a structure that is stiffer, yet additionally utilizes two new motors for the car that guarantee more effectiveness and more power separately. What's left is a competent car that gives a false representation of its person-on-foot looks, particularly with a Turbo 4 underhood. The Legacy handles likewise to the Outback, which was great, yet is burdened with less weight. We land at a 5 for execution in light of the fact that, in contrast to the Outback, the Legacy's best life is on asphalt and most purchasers will choose the base motor that is satisfactory, yet not overpowering. It's a 5. Both Legacies tap level 4s for power, albeit one's tied with a turbocharger. The base motor is a 2.5-liter level 4 that makes 182 horsepower mated to a CVT with oar shifters and reproduced rigging steps when drivers remain on the throttle. It walks up to 60 miles per hour in over 8 seconds, however the Legacy's energetic throttle causes it feel quicker than that. The car is less energetic on the throttle than the base Outback, and we love the 4 entryway more for simple drives. All-wheel drive is standard on all Legacy models and it's a commonplace vibe in the driver's seat. The directing is light, however exact, in spite of the fact that weight and the guiding wheel doesn't develop proportionately to the speed in a portion of our progressively vivacious drives. Here's the means by which we know. Engineers said that body count in the Legacy has been decreased by 45% contrasted with earlier years, which encourages it feel progressively sure and planted out and about. We dashed up about Void Gulch streets in Southern California in our first drives of the Legacy. But we additionally discovered, the front swaggers and back multi-connect suspension are tuned more for solace with milder dampers. On enormous knocks at higher rates, the agreeable car bobs along the street, and it's progressively articulated in Turbo 4 variants. That Turbo 4, obtained from the Greater Ascent 3-push hybrid, makes 260 horsepower in the Legacy XT and slingshots up to 60 miles per hour in around 6 seconds. Its thick power ends up past 3,000 revolutions per minute and doesn't stop well into the triple digits on the speedometer. Mountain State drivers will need to consider the Legacy XT for its passing ability and descending simplicity, in spite of the fact that taking advantage of the turbos sinks the efficiency from the mid-30s and base Legacy models into the mid-20s and Legacy XT renditions. The Legacy XT is snared to a comparative CVT that needs slack and an elastic band feeling endemic to the belt and pulley transmission type. Most Legacy vehicles will ride on 17-inch wheels, in spite of the fact that Sport, Limited, and Touring releases ride on 18-inch tires. The ride is agreeable and calm, with a touch of bouncing over bumpier streets at high speeds. Greater Haggle springs would make the XT a sublime energetic vehicle. Moderate-sized cars like the 2020 Legacy have a mystery, the majority of them are full-size autos. The current year's story of the tape per use is likewise to the active form, it's about the similar length and width as a year ago's vehicle with comparable space between the wheels. Subaru misuses that space well for a Lodge that is enormous enough for 5 grown-ups, with 15.1 cubic feet of room in the back for payload. The Legacy's increasingly down-to-earth kinfolk is called an Outback, however the customary car is almost as extensive. We give it focuses better than expected for its front and back seat facilities and its trunk. It's a 8. Most Legacies will leave the production line with tough fabric upholstery, albeit top trims get milder Napa calfskins that are a first for the Subaru. The front seats are wide and agreeable, with satisfactory reinforces and extendable thigh pads on top models. The direct front cubbies are little-ish, and somewhat ungainly to deal with. The little receptacle forward of the cup holder is unreasonably little for some cell phones, and a discretionary CD player eats into focus support space. It's anything but difficult to move into the back seats this year on account of the wide entryway patterns and a spacious rearward sitting arrangement. Once on board, 3 normal grown-ups will fit crosswise over fine and dandy, with about 40 creeps of room to breathe and great stretch-out space. In contrast to the Outback, the Legacy's rooftop cuts into headroom by only a few inches, which might be an issue for long middles or NBA front courts. The Legacy swallows 15.1 cubic feet of load, enough for 4 full-size bags, a few packs of mulch, or whatever your end of the week requires. The storage compartment pattern is more extensive this year and its liftover is generally low. Each Legacy gets a sound-stifling windshield that removes street commotion, and limited XT and Touring XT cars get sound-stifling front windows that adequately remove most motor clamors. Subaru's made the Legacy calmer and more quiet this year, a much-needed development over earlier ages. The 2020 Legacy is unreasonably new for government and autonomous analyzers to demolish for the sake of science. Until they do, our score here will sit tight for one more day. There's motivation to be idealistic for those scores. The Legacy is based on a comparable stage as the Subaru Ascent Hybrid, which was named a top safety pick plus by the US and earned a 5-star generally speaking score by the feds. Like the Ascent, each Legacy is outfitted with programmed crisis braking, versatile voyage control, and dynamic path control. Vulnerable side screens and back-programmed crisis braking are on the alternatives list for generally Legacies. The Legacy is furnished with 8 airbags, including side blinds for back travelers, and rides on a casing fortified by more steel and imparted to the Outback. The Legacy has one key favorable position: outward vision, especially toward the back, is preferred in the Legacy over it is in the Outback. Subaru's 11.6-inch touchscreen may get every one of the eyeballs, however the 2020 Legacy's worth will merit a subsequent look. Beginning from $23,645 as an incentive among cars and all vehicles. Its base cost,